Hello and welcome to our podcast named Detours. This podcast embraces the unexpected twists and turns that shapes the journeys of our lives that God sends us down. I'm your host and fellow traveler, Mike. I'm here with my beautiful wife, Deb, and we invite you to join us on this exploration of uncharted territories we encounter along the way. So without further ado, let's dive into this episode. Hello, Detours family. Welcome to another episode. As always, I am here with my gorgeous wife, Deb.
Hi, guys.
And we are here this week, despite extreme exhaustion. We are going to take a detour from our, what I guess I would say our season has been, because we are on a detour right now. A little bit of a doozy, wouldn't you say?
Oh, God, yes.
So we are
exhausted.
Absolutely exhausted, but it's a topic that we thought was, it applies to almost everyone eventually. You run into this topic.
Yep.
And yeah, so we've been in this very brief season
Of caregiving
for Deb's mom.
Yeah, and Dad, you know.
Yeah, definitely, and Dad.
Yeah.
So little background, Deb, your parents have been married. They just celebrated 59 years together.
I know. Amazing to me.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Next year is the big 6-0 for them.
Yep.
They are quite the characters.
Yep. Mom's 82, Dad's 92, and they are spunky and...
And Dad's actually 93 in 4 days.
Oh, yeah, well, that's true. 4 days, he'll be 93. Oh, my Lord.
Yeah, and they are, once, what do they say? Once a man, twice a child. And we're
yeah.
certainly in that second round of being a child. But yeah, I guess a little bit of backstory. Why don't you give us kind of what the plan was originally as for last week when your sister came down? I think it was last week.
Okay, so Mom is dealing with heart issues and some other various health issues that could affect the heart. And so we finally, after 6 months of doctor visits and phone calls not being returned, and just the aggravation to actually get this heart surgery scheduled and get her there. She now is looking at a potential infection. She's been dealing with infections for months now. And so the concern is, oh my gosh, we're going to have her brand new heart valve. They're going to send her home and she's going to get infected. So now we're advocating left and right to anyone who will listen, please. We're afraid this is going to get infected. We need her to stay. And they're telling us, no. We have a whole team out on a national conference. It's just not doable. And I had one lady who I had been speaking with on a regular basis, who was the coordinator to the heart surgery, say, Deb, it's not going to happen. I mean, so adamant, and she was kind about it, but I was just like, oh, okay. Like, I'm really getting no for an answer. And I was...
So, hold on. Let's back up. You're going really quick. So Mom has the procedure to fix the heart valve, but she's got some other things going on in her body that are fixable, but at least that's the hope. They are fixable. And the plan right now is next week for the doctors to go in and do what they can to fix what's causing all of these infections.
Correct.
So we go in and we see the heart doctor. He comes in, the surgeon comes in after the heart procedure. The heart procedure was a success.
Amen. Yes.
But as he sees the level of bacteria in her system and so on and so forth, he grows pretty quickly concerned that valve will get infected.
Right.
So he orders the next procedure for them to go in and do what they can to fix what's going on in her body to stop these infections. Right?
Yes.
So that's where we're at now. So this heart procedure, replacing a heart valve, really isn't that big of a deal. She was supposed to go in on a Wednesday and either go home on a Thursday or a Friday.
Right.
But the week before the procedure, they did some, blood tests or a couple of little things.
Yeah.
And that's when they saw the bacteria level in her blood. And they said, bring her in on Monday instead of Wednesday because we want to get her on some drip antibiotics for a few days beforehand to build up, her body for to fight this infection, keep it away from the heart valve.
Mm-hmm.
So we do. So all of a sudden, the detours begin. Your sister was flying down. Everyone was planning on this, mom going in on Wednesday. Turns out she goes in on Monday, a couple days early.
And she's still in there now.
And yeah, she was supposed to be in the hospital anywhere from 24 to 48 hours, but it has been 11 days, 12 days.
Yeah, this will be the 12th.
Yeah, today is the 12th day, and best case scenario, she'll be in there probably around 16, 17 days.
Yeah, they said after this surgery, it could be anywhere from 2 days to 7.
Of recovery, depending on how her body responds to it. So, yeah, what was supposed to be just a quick, literally, to replace a heart valve, the actual procedure itself is only about 45 minutes.
Yeah. And
people, it's not a dangerous surgery by any means. So we thought, we'll be there for mom for a couple days, supporting her. We'll bounce in and out of the hospital. And lo and behold, God had something completely different in mind.
For sure.
And so, back to what you were talking through. So,
the exhaustion of, you plan something in your mind. And I have to say, in this season, and this has been since December when she really started to get sick, nothing has gone as planned. Like, the word plan makes me laugh. It's just
you realize I've never seen being in the hospital when you're caring for someone elderly that she has a lot going on.
She does.
Not even just the things that were in there to get surgeries to take care of, but just pre-existing conditions that she had. She's 82.
Right.
My goodness. So she has a lot going on in her body, but to go in there, it's been incredible to see God opening and closing doors on almost an hourly basis. Not even, I couldn't even say daily, because this latest procedure for Monday, I've heard 3 different times in the last 24 hours that she's going to start that procedure. So yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I think the lesson I've learned the most in this 6 months is, Deb, you're just not in control. And no matter how much you want to be, it's just, you have to, I have to actually surrender this on an hour-to-hour basis. And that is just, it's great in theory. Like, we talk about this in the Christian world, like, worldview is just, you're surrendering it all to God and she's in good hands. And those are true statements. There's no doubt. But to actually do it, to actually walk out that faith and be like, okay, you're in control. I'm not. I cannot get upset because you see a picture I don't see. You know better than I do.
Yeah, it's definitely a different level of trust with God when you're dealing with a family member.
Sure.
It's one thing to say, God, I trust you with this job, or, whatever it may be. But for my dad, when it was his son, for us, when it's been your mother, it's a different level of pressure. And the Christian thing to say is, well, let it go, and God's in control, and this, that, and the other. But man, under the surface, the emotions that we've gone through,
I think frustration has probably been my greatest frustration and anger. Like, I called you up yesterday. I'm like, please pray. I am so angry. I am so ticked off.
It's not just... It's not, you can be angry at so many different things. Like, you can be on the phone trying to get someone from insurance to answer questions, or, ever since COVID, I think the hospitals are just so overwhelmed because they're understaffed that getting some doctors' staff to return phone calls or give you medical records, it's been so difficult, and everything just starts bubbling up under the surface.
Yes.
The frustration, and you just want to pull your hair out and scream. And
I have.
You have. Luckily,
I've screamed and cried.
Luckily,
both.
You work at NASA, and you can just drive out into the middle of nowhere
and scream.
And scream in your vehicle. So you don't lose your testimony or something. But
yes, I know.
this is interesting because both my parents are pretty happy and healthy. Knock on wood. My dad was diagnosed with cancer back in January or February, but it looks like he's beaten it and he's on the other side of it.
Amen.
But this is, his hospital stay was just a couple days. Went in, they cut out what they needed to, stitched him back up, sent him home, and he didn't need chemo or radiation, nothing like it. It was pretty well, no pun intended, clean cut. Where mom was supposed to be clean, you would expect cancer. I would have expected, whatever, we're on day 12, I would have expected that with my dad and your mom to be the clean cut in and out. And really it was reversed.
Yeah, for sure.
And, to compound things, so you have, for you have your insurance calls and this, that, and the other, but you're also dealing with a unique situation at work that's exhausting you.
That's true. I have, a 3-person, it's not my staff, but there's 3 of us and 1 has left. And so now there's 2 of us. And then the coworker had a trip planned out of the country. And so she's gone and I'm literally the only one on center. And now mom's going into surgery number 2. And I'm just like, can I leave early? And is this okay? And trying just to arrange like the amount of overtime that's happening with the level of mental exhaustion that I'm dealing with. And again, trying to remain professional with people that I deal with on a daily basis, because I respect and care for the people that I do business with. And so I'm trying to put on I'm trying to hide the fact that I'm going crazy in my car and screaming and crying, 15 minutes before I go out to a job site. I'm like, oh, is my face puffy? Do I look like I've been crying? So it's been that challenge of trying to really manage time, manage emotions, continually asking God to give me the endurance to really deal with the lack of control. That's really what it boils down to, is the lack of any kind of control. I can't predict the outcome. Every outcome I thought I was going to get, I didn't. Every phone call I thought I was going to get, I didn't. And trying not to look too far ahead into the future. You told me that just the other day.
Yeah, that's the advice. Like my dad gave this advice to me. I don't know that he mentioned it on the podcast, but so many times when you're dealing with a sick relative that's very close to you, or just any situation, and like when you called me up the other day and you were just you were at your wit's end, part of my advice to you were kind of looking at the whole picture.
It was overwhelming,
and it was too much for you. And so my advice was, hey, what can we do today? We need to just kind of focus on today, and that's even biblical. Let tomorrow worry about itself.
Yeah.
So what's in front of us today? How do we divide and conquer? This past week, you've been slammed at work. The other day, you get up at 5:30 every morning because your day at NASA starts at 7. It takes forever to get in. It's a long way to get to NASA. You have to go through all these security protocols, even though you work there. So it takes a long time for you to just get to work. And so your day started at 5:30. You weren't getting home till after 7 o'clock in the evening. So it was my week to be over at the hospital and care for mom. And it was really just, that's the amazing part of having a supportive marriage is it's
I'm
just
so
like,
grateful.
Okay. Yeah, and I know you would do the same thing for me if it was my dad or my mom or
Absolutely.
my sister or anybody. You would do the same thing, but you just kind of got to look at today. Okay, how do we get through today? And if today is too much, if today is still overwhelming, shorten the time period. How do I get through the next hour?
Yeah. When we spoke, even that next hour seemed insurmountable, and I was just weeping, and you're like, it's okay, sweetheart, we just take a deep breath, we can deal with the next hour, we don't have to deal with the whole day.
Yeah, don't worry about the fight with insurance, don't worry about this, that, the other. That's not going to happen right now. So let's not even look at it. Let's not consider it. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. And that's the advice that I would give anyone. That's what's really helped me so far, is just, okay, what's in the very near future that I need to look at? Because when I step back, yeah, you can just get overwhelmed. You can go, there's no light at the end of this tunnel. When is this going to end?
It does feel like that.
You can, yeah.
Especially when you're exhausted. And I think that's something most caregivers that are going to listen to the podcast really do understand. It's an exhaustion like I've never felt before. It's a bone aching exhaustion, because it's not just a physical thing. It's a emotional exhaustion. It's a spiritual exhaustion. It's a mental, the mental mind games and the constant, multitasking of ideas in my brain. All of those things make the journey very exhausted. And I don't think I've ever been this tired before. And I raised kids, you know what I mean? Like I think taking care of an elderly parent so far has been more exhausting than being a single mom.
Yeah. I mean, I served in convalescent ministry at Calvary, Fort Lauderdale, and we would go to nursing homes, and they are kids. They're little kids. It's like,
yes,
they want a piece of candy, but they can't have the piece of candy, not because it's going to ruin dinner, but it's because they have diabetes
or something,
or they're on medication, or they have no teeth, so they have no way to eat it. It really is funny. And I think the hardest part for your parents that I'm seeing is, I think they have begun just the tip of realizing that they're losing their independence a little bit.
I know, it's sad.
Because they've been independent. I mean, they're 82 and 92, and they've been independent for
ever until now.
They can, your dad still drives. Your dad still goes to the gym
a couple of days a week.
Yeah, at least 3-4 days a week. And while mom's been in the hospital, I think he's going every day.
Probably keeps his mind off of things.
Oh, yeah. And that's the other hard part too, is like yesterday we had to tag team. I drove over to Orlando and I was at the hospital with mom, and you were kind of talking to me going, hey, what do we do here? What is going on? Mom's in Orlando. Should I come over and visit mom after I get out of work? And I was sitting there and I texted you and I said, hey, just see how you're feeling, see how much energy you have. But then I sat there and I thought about it and I said, you know what? No, you shouldn't come see mom. I'm here with mom. Mom's being taken care of.
Yeah, go see dad.
Go see dad, because he's in a house all by himself with no one there.
He's lonely.
And he was. And it was a blessing for you to go visit him. So it's not just caring for mom in the hospital, but they've been married 59 years. They were never apart. Yeah,
it wasn't until COVID hit in 2020 that my dad wound up in the hospital unrelated to COVID, but the protocols were so strange that they wouldn't let him go home. And I'm like, he doesn't have COVID. You're going to give him COVID in the hospital. And yet he was there for about a week. And mom was like, wow, this is the first time I've ever been alone in the house. And I was just like, really, mom? Yeah, I mean, we go on vacation together. I've never been alone. And I thought, wow, that is so unusual to find. And yet dad, I said to him the other day, I was like, wow, this is a long time you and mom have been apart. And he's like, yeah, the longest. And it's just so strange to me.
And what I admire about your parents is just how much they do together. They truly enjoy the same things.
Yes.
They met dancing over 60 years ago. They love playing cards together.
They do.
They have they during COVID they got a little binder, and they kept track of all their gin games and their pinochle games. They played over 2,000 games just since COVID of each of those. And ask them if they come over for dinner, you ask them what the score is, and they'll be like, oh, it's 2,043 games.
Yeah.
to 1,900.
And they're so competitive.
Yeah. Oh, and they'll tell you each game how it broke down. And
they're so competitive. It's funny.
What is it? Apparently blitzing is a thing where it's your score and you beat the person. The other person has 0 points.
Yes.
You blitz. I don't know card games exactly, but I don't know if that's gin or pinochle, but God forbid one blitzes the other. You never hear the end of it,
Oh, yeah, that's so true.
But it's so funny to listen to them because they just bust each other's chops. And, but they really do everything together. They could go, like today, Dad's going to be going to a barbecue at the church.
He is? Oh, that's so good.
Yeah, but Mom would always be there with him.
Yeah, I know.
If they would go to the clubhouse and they would go, if there's a barbecue at the clubhouse or just they're always together. They go to the grocery store together. I think the only thing they do separately is Dad goes to the gym.
Yeah.
And that's about it. And so that separation for them
breaks my heart. Like you could just see they're so lonely and it hurts to watch.
And yeah, Dad came with me to the hospital a few days ago when we went to visit Mom. We were there for a few hours and we went home. And when I went to drop him off, he was inviting me into the house for all sorts of things, trying to bribe me in with ice cream, this, that, and the other. But I had to get home. I had work to do. There were things still to do at the house. And my heart just broke to sit there and say, Dad, I can't, because I knew he was just lonely and he wanted something to do. But I think one of the topics we got to talk about, even though your heart breaks for Mom, your heart breaks for Dad, how self-care is a real thing.
Yeah, it is.
During all of this, you cannot burn yourself out. So what are you doing for self-care as we're trying to maintain all of
napping? I mean,
you are the queen of napping.
It's helpful. It's really helpful. Napping is definitely something that has given me a little bit more energy. Because like I said, I'm exhausted. Writing, which even at that, I'm trying to think of it as self-care, but it's hard getting things out on a page. So sometimes it doesn't feel like self-care. I have a gift certificate you gave me, and I'm going to go get a massage. I have a day off of work like next week for a national holiday, and I'm like, I am doing this. I need this, and just that kind of stuff where you're just like, okay, that's important just so that I have enough endurance to do what I need to do. I also think a good thing about self-care is it's not always physical, like I'm going to get a massage or I'm going to go and take a nap, but setting boundaries with other people. Like I have a family member who I love very much, but sometimes when I get on the phone, their energy is so different than mine. It stresses me out. And I'm like, you know what? I can't answer every phone call. I have to moderate how I feel and realize, do I have the bandwidth to deal with this person's emotions? Because they're having their own journey. They're having their own journey and their own emotions, and they're entitled to that, but I can't endure that. So I don't have to answer every phone call. I'm also learning that I can't meet everybody's expectations. And when you come from a, dysfunctional type of family, codependency of like, I need to please you for me to have value. And I've dealt with that most of my life, is this performance of, satisfying people. And I guess the best way to say it is it's people pleasing. And I never would have considered myself a people pleaser. But as I've watched myself grow in healing, I realized, yeah, I have a tendency to do that. And one of the self-cares is I'm not going to please everybody today. And you know what? You're one of the people I'm not going to please. And know that that's okay, because God is pleased. Then that's the main priority is, God, are you pleased with my efforts? You know my heart. You know my heart. And I'm not always going to get things right, but you give grace. And that's really my main priority is, do I honor God and do I honor my parents? And so I can't please everybody. And that's something I've learned in the self-care process.
Yeah, and oddly, it reminds me, I can't quote it verbatim, but there's a line that C.S. Lewis talks about. How do you know if a line is curved? Well, you hold it up to a straight line.
Right.
And, you're exhausted. Your sister lives in Jersey. She's probably worried. Mm-hmm. The week she was here, she got exhausted. Mom and dad are exhausted. I'm exhausted. So we're all these curved lines. And the only one that's not exhausted in this entire process is God. And so you're right. You have to go to him, bring him your frustrations, bring him your exhaustion. He's going to be right there waiting. He's not worried. He's not tired. He's there for the whole thing.
Yeah.
And really use him as the straight line that you can vent to, you can cry to, you can just pray to, meditate on, whatever it is.
Yeah. And I've been going to God with some pretty dark things, and a lot of that is anger. And I've said it a million times, I'll say it again, is anger's a secondary emotion. I think C.S. Lewis, if you're going to bring him into that, he's got a great quote about anger and really sitting with anger and interviewing anger and realizing her name is grief. And just like, wow, Lord, I am grieving it. And I think that's the thing that caregiving really represents, is it's not, if a family member dies, there's a grief process that occurs. But when you watch someone slowly diminish, it's an ongoing grief, and it's moment by moment you're grieving these losses, and it's like really the anger of like, why can't someone else in the family help, or why can't anyone see the effort I'm putting in, or I have a brother who's absent from the family, and that makes me very angry. I'm like, I'm here, boots on the ground, and you call once. And so that anger is really, I think, sadness and grief, and anger manifests because it's easier to deal with than grief. And I know this just from my own journey, and I have to keep going to God. Like, I'm angry, but I'm more than angry, Lord, and you know that. And I need you to help me process this grief. Even when they recently signed like a power of attorney. And for a caregiver, that's a relief. That could have been a battle. That could have been like, I'm not giving you my independence. It could have been a battle. So in one respect, it's very much a blessing that wasn't a fight. But then in the other respect, you're like, wow, like, how sad. I'm grateful that I can be the one that cares for you, but like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry that you're relinquishing control. And
it needs to happen.
It does.
Power of attorney is a critical step if you're caring for any elderly person.
Oh yeah.
To your point, luckily it wasn't a battle for us.
I know, but the day I signed it was just this immense weight, like, oh my God, I'm responsible for my parents. Like, the weight of that just felt so heavy. I was shaking when those papers were signed. I had a friend come and notarize it, and we went out to lunch, and she's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, I don't know if I'm okay, but like, I couldn't even get the date right on the paperwork. I was so like, this is a big deal.
Yeah.
And even that day, my mom was like, "Can I sign it in my pajamas?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, yeah, okay, Ma." Like,
clearly the weight was on your shoulders and not hers.
Yeah.
She's a character, and she's been such a trooper.
Oh my God, I admire her so much.
Yeah.
She has been like even in the midst of the trial, she's just been joyful. Like, she's just, what am I going to do? I'm here. Like, just very go with the flow. Like, okay, this isn't what I wanted, but I'm here.
Yeah, and she's been very happy and very pleasant, polite with the nurses and doctors and laughing. And, Dad would go, they were sitting there playing cards and entertaining one another. And
yeah, nurses would come join the party.
you remember when your dad was in the hospital for that week?
He was livid.
He was a terror.
Nobody wanted to go into the room.
He was the exact opposite of
I
Mom.
know.
He would rip into those nurses in there. That's like, you don't mess with people that handle your food.
Yeah, that's true.
You don't mess,
Or your medication.
Exactly. Don't mess with those people that handle your medication. And yeah, your mom has just been the exact opposite. She's been as joyful as she could possibly be with all these detours. One of the hardest things at the hospital is there is absolutely nothing to do. The TVs are awful. I couldn't even tell you the brand. I was looking at the TV the other day. I never seen this brand before. This is like a knockoff of a knockoff. And the only speaker, the TV doesn't have any volume. It's all controlled by the remote. So the sound comes out of the remote. So you have to sit there with the remote next to your head to get any sense of volume. Closed captioning, unfortunately, doesn't work.
We can't
for
get
Mom.
it off the Spanish closed captioning.
Yeah, so Mom is sitting there
Yeah.
watching, some Hallmark channel, but the closed captioning's in Spanish. But she's just sitting there and smiling, And poor lady, we gave her some crossword puzzles and coloring books.
Yeah, I got her coloring.
And she showed me pictures yesterday that she was
She's
coloring.
very proud of them.
Oh, yeah. She even had the nurses sharpen her pencils for her because she was having a hard time staying in the lines because they had gotten too dull. And,
How adorable is that?
Yeah. She's cute as a button, and she's definitely got the nurses on her side over there. She'll order one little piece of cake and they'll bring her two.
Aw.
So she's playing her cards right. That's for sure. And she's kept such a positive attitude, but that's part of the exhaustion too. You go to the hospital, there is nothing to do. They have all these benches and they have all these couches and everything else, but there's no pillows or anything. So if you're exhausted and you need to lie down, they don't even give you pillows or anything. You're just sprawled out somewhere like an airport for days on end.
Yes.
You wake up with cramps because you've been concocting your body just to try and get comfortable.
Yeah, you have a picture of Anthony, my son, scrolled out on a plastic couch of sorts,
And the food is awful at the hospital. It's just not pleasant, and it just adds to the exhaustion. But you have to be there. You have to advocate for Mom. That's been the biggest thing that I think we learned is when we kind of learned about the danger of this infection. When they said that they weren't going to fix it right away, they were going to send her home. Your immediate thought was, well, it took me 6 months to get the heart procedure.
Yeah.
If it takes another 6 months, Mom's may not be here because this infection can travel.
Yes.
And so we had to advocate.
Yes. And you have two different daughters that advocate in different ways. And I was just like, oh my gosh, my sister is very forceful. And at times that's very needed. Like you need a good cop and a bad cop. And I'm the good cop. She's the bad cop. And we've laughed about it. So I'm not saying anything that isn't already like common knowledge in our family, and at some point, like, it was like, I have to navigate how I communicate with this team, and the bad cop thing isn't working. It's just not. So let's go with the good cop. And like really just sitting down, I remember sitting down with the nurse and saying, listen, I understand that this is an outpatient procedure, and I get that. And that makes sense if the variables were different, but you're not looking at the big picture. And I kept saying, the big picture is this, and trying to almost like a sales pitch, negotiate like, hey, you're narrow focused right now. I need you to stop moving in the narrow and open up your eyes and see the history of this woman, and just trying and, being, trying not to like be nasty, but trying to be like as calm as I can, but as very specific, like, hey, you're not doing the right thing by my mother, period.
And that, that's what make doctors good, is that they just look at the disease, no emotional attachment. That can be a very good thing. A lot of that's probably helps them not burn out. I don't want to speak for them. And that's what was happening, is the procedure that mom had to get done. Every other person, you're in and out. The procedure would take 45 minutes, and this is not the heart. This is the fighting the infection. It's probably a 45-minute procedure, and then you're out the next day, or you're out that same day. But to your point, mom is a different story, because she just had a heart valve replaced. She's got multiple things going on.
Yep.
Our position was, she's in here in the hospital. She's on drip antibiotics. She had been on antibiotics and it wasn't working.
Right.
The infections, it wasn't killing the infection. So she's in here in the hospital getting better care, stronger drip antibiotics, so on and so forth, that's fighting off this infection. If you let her go and she goes home and she goes back on that antibiotic regimen she was on, it wasn't working. And we're afraid of that infection traveling to that heart valve, and all of a sudden a not so serious, like semi-serious situation becomes
very
more than
serious.
that.
Right.
So you definitely understand what those doctors and nurses, what their position was, but you had to advocate, and you're sitting there fighting against the norm.
Right.
For them, they do these procedures. This procedure, they probably do 2 or 3 a day.
Oh, yeah.
The doctor that did the heart procedure said he had done 3,000 valve replacements. So this other procedure, that I'll keep it the same, that team had probably done 3,000 of those.
Right.
And virtually every one of those people left the same day or the next day.
Right.
Where mom, like we said, we're on day 12 of her being in the hospital, and it's going to be at least 17, 18, 19 days of her being in the hospital. But my goodness, if she had come home.
Even the preparatory things that you needed to do for exploratory surgeries to figure out how to fix it would have been a nightmare at home. Like,
was dragging an 82-year-old to a hospital. It's an hour drive.
And that's with no traffic. I mean, we're looking an hour 20.
Yeah. From where we are over to Orlando with no traffic is an hour.
Yeah.
But she's 82. She needs a walker. Like, it's at least a half-day ordeal, at least.
Oh, yeah. Just to get him in the car and ready to go somewhere is like, again, it's like, I feel like I'm reaching that motherhood point where I'm wrangling toddlers that, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful manner. It's just they move at a very slow pace. They're, you have to almost be their eyes and ears for them. Like, did you bring this? Did you bring that? It's like you're packing a diaper bag, for lack of a better way. You have a whole satchel of stuff. Do I have snacks for them? Because if they get hungry, forget it.
There's
You
some
always say
F-bombs being dropped. If dad's hungry, their F-bombs are coming out.
And this is a guy that never curses unless he's hungry. He's like, F this and F that. And you're like, oh my gosh, Dad, just relax.
And, and to compound things, mom was in the hospital in December and fell in the hospital.
And broke her teeth and wound up going to physical therapy for months and months.
It took probably 3-4 months for us to piece her back together just from that fall. And that was in the hospital while she was walking with the care of the hospital.
Yeah.
And
that was a previous hospital. Thank God this is a better hospital.
Yeah. But we have that's in the back of our minds, so we're probably being slightly overprotective, but you can't help it.
Yeah.
Because you sit there and you go, all it took was one fall, and the next 3 or 4 months was all sorts of, to your point, she busted up her dentures, so it was, we still don't have her dentures fixed, and it's been 6 months.
Right. We have the top, but not the bottom.
Yeah. And so she was living for 3 months with no teeth. And
gumming a steak.
She was determined.
I know.
That woman in food.
I know. She's obsessed.
The funniest thing to me, so every Friday we have the whole family over for dinner, right? Your son and his wife come over, and mom and dad come over, and we do the cooking 9 times out of 10, every
Yeah.
once in a while, your son will offer it up and everybody goes down there. But we had him over, and part of the meal was a salad, and Mom doesn't take any of the salad. So I go, Mom, why don't you have some of the salad? Oh, I can't eat salad. Salad's difficult to eat with no teeth. And then I come back 15 minutes later, and she's got a caramel with chocolate on it and sea salt, and she's sitting there gumming this chocolate. It was hysterical. I go, Mom, how can you eat this hard caramel that's got sea salt on the top that's going to cut your gums, and you can't eat lettuce? And she stated her case, man. She was convinced that it's easier to eat these salted caramel chocolate things than it was to. But that's just who she is, you know. And thank goodness she's had such a good attitude. I couldn't imagine, because your mom has the potential of she's in a bad mood.
Oh yeah, watch out! Don't poke the
out.
bear. Yeah,
but she hasn't once.
I know. Praise the Lord.
And you know she's exhausted. Mm-hmm. You know, when my dad was in for cancer, he was basically in, I think it was like 3 or 4 days, I want to say, something like that. But when I was talking to him, I said, what was the hardest thing? He said, there's 2 things. He said, number 1, I didn't bring a toothbrush with me. And I didn't have a toothbrush, so I went 4 days without brushing my teeth.
Why didn't they give him a toothbrush? They gave Mom a toothbrush.
You'd have to ask him that. I don't know. I don't remember. But for some reason, he went 4 days without brushing his teeth. That was his number 1 thing. But number 2, he said, he was sharing a room with someone. He's like, you can't sleep, because every 4 hours they're taking your vitals. But when you have a roommate, now that's twice that they're coming in to do. So it's every 2 hours, somebody's in the room. They're giving you medications. They're bringing carts. They're bringing students.
Yes, lots of students.
And
your dad had a gassy roommate too. I remember.
I remember the stories. I was not there. And but his roommate was like fighting with his wife and yelling and screaming. He's like, I went 4 days and I didn't sleep.
Oh God.
You know, and with his procedure, after the procedure, when he went home, he couldn't lie down. He had to be in a seated position for several days. So by the end of the week, he was just absolutely exhausted. And like I said, that was only like a week. Well, Mom, we're coming up on 2 weeks.
I know.
So
thank God she's not sharing a room with anyone, but they are in there every hour to do something.
Yes. Checking something, cleaning something, food, students, you know, hey, let's get up and walk, whatever it is. And even, she's been a trooper with the walking.
I know. I brought her tiara, and I was like, Mom, put the tiara on and walk around and just wave at people. It'll be a trip. And she did it several times.
This 82-year-old Italian woman
with a tiara,
walking around a hospital with a tiara, giving them a princess wave to people she doesn't know any strangers. She'll start up a conversation with anyone. Doesn't matter if it's a toddler that knows 2 words or somebody that's 106 years old.
She's awesome. And then one lady was like, wow, you're going too fast. I'm going to give you a ticket. And she gave her like a pink Post-it. And by the time we got back to the room, she's like, what's this Post-it for again? I'm like, oh, that's your speeding ticket, Mom. You were going too fast.
She's a character, to say the least. But, you know, it's been...
It's a journey.
An interesting season. And, you know, and during the hardest seasons, for some people, it can seem like you don't have time for worship. You don't have time for gratitude. But I'll tell you what, at the end of every day, when you look back, there were multiple detours every single day during this process. But you absolutely see that God's been with us the whole time.
Oh, yeah.
There have been mountains. Just this next procedure that supposedly is going to be happening.
Oh, they were adamant that it was not going to happen. And then the woman that I was telling you about in the very beginning of the episode, she was like, no, Deborah, it's not going to happen. When she called me up, she's like, I don't understand how this is happening. And I'm like, I do. Yeah. I said, well, I prayed. And she just kind of passed right by that statement. But I was like, yeah, God moved a mountain is what happened. Yeah. But she's like, I don't understand how this is happening. It just made me giggle a little bit.
Yeah. It's been very clear You know, like I said, I think I mentioned it earlier, just God, when he's closed a door, he has slammed it shut.
For sure.
And when he's opened it, it's been wide open. And there are times where it appears like a door is open and you walk into it and you realize it's a brick wall. Oh, that door was never, no, that's not the door.
That's a good point. I have experienced that, like, oh, I thought I was headed through an open door. And those are the most frustrating. Those are the ones that you're like, I misread the signs, Lord. I just don't understand. Like, I really thought we had a go on this. And then having to surrender that up and be like, okay, you know, there's a reason why that door was closed, and I will see it, you know. And then a couple of days later, I'm like, oh, that's why you closed that door. This is such a better door. This is such a better door. Thank you, Lord. Like, and that's with any detour in life.
Well, and we've been lucky that we've seen that it's better, but I know there are details that we're not even seeing.
Yes.
That God knows that, you know, we'll just never even have the privilege to see that. But he closed doors for a reason and never showed us the why. Mm-hmm. That was the interesting thing with season 2, talking through my brother and his situation, is when you lose a child, you don't see a silver lining. Your eyes are so fixated on what's happening that you lose sight of God sometimes.
Yeah.
And now that we're 40 years removed from Stuart's passing, my goodness, God was there every step of the way. And even though he chose an outcome that we didn't choose, or we would prefer not, certainly to say it, to understatement of the year.
Right.
Now we can look back and go, okay, I see it. I see what you did there. Doesn't mean, you know, there are things that I don't like, but I see that you were with me for sure. And I see that you're still working 40 years later. And, you know, my dad just published the book. If you guys want it, go to our website, fill out the form, and we will send it to you for free. But
yeah, it's a great book. It tells just the journey of losing his son and losing your brother. And I read it and just cried and laughed and was like, wow, God is big.
He is. And so, yeah, it's been interesting with Mom in the hospital. All sorts of lessons learned and relearned. And
we're in the process of learning. Like when we debriefed about this, I was like, I don't know. I mean, like, I'm still in the middle of it. Like, I feel like I'm supposed to come on to the show and talk about all these things that, you know, I understand. And it's just really, you're in the journey. You're in the dark right now on a lot of things, and all you can do is take that next step forward. And so I'm sure there'll be more to learn.
Oh, even when she gets out.
Oh yeah.
And it's just because her life will change, you know, from a diet perspective, from an exercise perspective. We're going to be going down a different path. So there's definitely going to be lessons to be learned.
Oh yeah.
So, but yeah, pray for her. Her name is Arlene, guys. If you can,
Arlene and John.
Arlene and John. If you can add them to your prayer list, we're certainly going to be praying for them. But it's been very interesting. Yeah, this podcast. When we were talking about what episode do we do next, I kind of said we kind of got to do Mom, don't we? I mean, this is a detour in our lives, and
yeah,
this has been like we haven't sat down for an hour and externally processed as a couple. We haven't had the time.
Yeah, I know.
We haven't had an hour where you weren't ready to go to bed, or I didn't have to jump on the computer because I had to catch up at work or whatever. So this has been therapeutic. The last 50 minutes or so. So I'm glad we did it.
Me too.
But yeah, keep Mom in your prayers, guys. The day that this episode is released is the day that she goes into the hospital.
Yep.
Goes into
surgery. Surgery number 2.
Yeah, surgery number 2, procedure number 3. Yeah, it's supposed to be at 10:55 in the morning, but I'll believe that when they wheel her in at 10:50, I'll believe it. But yeah, we could definitely use the prayers. But thank you guys so much for listening. We hope that, some of this is relatable to you guys, and
yeah,
hopefully there's some wisdom in some of the things that we're saying as we externally process that can help you guys out. But thank you guys so much for joining us on this episode. We will be back in a couple weeks.
Yep.
Who knows what? It may be Arlene part 2.
Maybe.
Who knows? But we will see you guys in a couple of weeks. Thanks so much for joining us.
Take care. Thanks for listening to Detours. For more content, you can find us on Spirit FM Radio, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Play, or on our website at detours.life. To view my writings or to contact me for public speaking engagements, visit my website at debmarsalisi.com.